What a battle. There it is, ladies and gentlemen. We win. Oh, my goodness. Hey, everybody, welcome to the challenge. I am John Chapman. I'm the voice of one crying in the wilderness. Got my brother Glenn with me in the studio. Good to have you with us today, Glenn.
It's good to be here.
It is only, I'm looking at the clock right now. We have been arm wrestling the internet and the app for almost 25 minutes. 25 minutes. We've been figuring that out. And I am glad for everybody who has joined us. I hope you can still, I know it's been late, so there's my apology, but here we're going to get into it just the same. I don't know. Maybe we were having too much fun. I don't know. But
that could be.
This is it. You know, I don't want to say there was a conspiracy involved. I think it's just a technical glitch this time, and I think we're going to be okay in the end. But it's good to have everybody with us. Good to have everybody on the program today. We got some, actually, I know that President Trump, they're talking about a second assassination attempt has occurred. Mm-hmm. I know it's a couple of days ago, and there's been a lot of chatter about that. And there's some other stuff I want to get to today, too, which is just revealing, I think, again, of what's actually happening. And this isn't conspiratorial. You're just seeing the evidence of a country that can't stop helping itself, trying to run everybody. Mm-hmm. And I think we're going to see that too. But at least for now, I want to talk first just a little bit about the Trump experience on the golf course, Glenn. When did you find out about it, and what was your first thoughts when they said there's been a quote unquote second assassination attempt?
Right. I don't know. That's the crazy thing is, the sources are unreliable at best. And so you get a story like that, particularly from what you would see predominantly mainstream, the type of media source that would censor a podcast like this, you're not going to get any information at all. And I can speak to some experience of that just being in the airline world. You pick your favorite airplane wreck and good luck finding anything that resembles truth.
Right.
It's just, that's the nature of the beast. And so I recommend if you sit down and watch the news, bring a little container of salt so you can take each story with a grain of salt. And you're going to be right where you want to be.
How big is that container going to need to be, Glenn, with all those grains?
With all the garbage out on media now, it's going to be a big old bag, man. So it's just hard to tell. I don't think it's illegitimate or it didn't happen, but sorting through all the nonsense, oh boy.
Right. And if I could take that moment to say this too, because I don't know if we're technically media. If somebody says, "Do you have your license?" I would say, "I got a brain and the Bible," and so I feel like I'm pretty good behind the mic,
as good as any.
I think so. With that, and so part of it, and I enjoy this because people that follow the program here, people that follow the podcast, and we will always say this: two things are very important for you to know. One, I do not pretend to be not biased. That is hardly the premise of my life, right? And the other thing is that the information that we give you and we try to connect you with to go look it up, please don't not look it up. Mm-hmm. This is not the podcast that we say, "Hey, we went and got all the information found out for you so that you don't have to." Mm-hmm. I don't care if you're liberal or conservative media. That's like saying you're stupid and I'm God, and we're not God, and our listeners are not stupid. And that's why we encourage people to go look up, this information. We can't afford not to.
Well, kind of the premise has always been for, since the radio show that I was a part of and that you did for many years.
Yep.
And this type of thing is we just want to challenge people. And that's the topic of the podcast, to look for themselves, to reevaluate how they look at the news, how they look at life, how they have their worldview, and look at it encompassing as much information as you can get, and much real information as you can get. Because, obviously a lot of people do podcasts to make some money, to throw some stuff together or get some prestige or anything like that. And that's not the motive at all of this. It's that go out, take a look. Here's some tools that we might be able to give you that have been successful for us in trying to find out what's real and what's not. Always use caution, take a big step back and look at the whole thing and say, what's really going on here? And if it doesn't make sense, it probably doesn't make sense. In which case you take another big step back and say, let's move on to the next thing. And that'd be very frustrating to mainstream news, because they want you to take for granted everything that they tell you. Don't look it up. Don't challenge it. What we say is what it is, and we're going to move on with or without you, but this is the truth. And how do we quantify that? By the fact that other dissenting opinions, be they professional or otherwise, are flatly squashed.
Right.
So their objectives are obvious.
And I think sometimes if we look like we're the one that has the dissenting opinion, that's because the other information out there is always so intentional about requiring people to believe. We certainly do not require anybody to believe one thing we're saying here.
Oh, no.
That's the other premise about bringing what I want to say politics and faith, or in my case, and I always make this it's very important to know politics and Jesus Christ, who is my Savior, to the table, because when I'm not trying to say you must believe, I'm saying that's a part of the joy of each one of our lives is the individual's inability to have the freedom to think and believe whatever they want.
Hmm.
But I like the way you said it. We're just trying to present information that's worked for us.
Hmm.
And I would say the same is true about Christianity. It's worked for me, and it works necessarily for me, and it's built on a stronger foundation than anything I've ever pre-thought, which is why I say that. And then I say to people, if you don't want to believe that, that's fine. But if you want to find some truth, get your Bible out and start looking for yourself.
Mm.
I'm not telling you what or when to believe, but start asking and
Mhm,
go in that direction. That's for sure. With that being said, when we talk about, and it's been the discussion a little bit in regards to, I don't even know what to think. I've told people for some months, I don't even know. People will say, well, who are you going to vote for? And I say, well, I'm conservative in my values. I am independent with my listing. And I found that's very important. I left being listed with the Republican Party.
mhm.
I'm going to say, I don't know if it's been 16, 18 years ago, long time ago.
Me too.
For me, it happened in the George W. Bush era. That's the very first time ever, Glenn, I heard a president speak something. And it's the first time I ever had the stink test go off. And I went, that don't smell right.
Mhm.
That don't
Mhm.
smell right. Well, I bring it up to now. And it's not that, again, I'm not trying to be middle of the road because I'm very biased about other things. And I'm very happy to say that. That's why part of the reason we do this. And obviously, we do not get paid large amounts to do this. That's why we both have our jobs and we do
Yes.
this also. But when they said there was a second assassination attempt, and then they start talking about a guy who was a little ways away, a couple of holes out,
Mhm.
and they start bringing out the details. They said this was an unscheduled stop. So how did this guy know? I don't care how you cut it. It doesn't pass the stink
Mhm.
test. And whatever information comes forth at that point, to me, is suspect. It's
Mhm.
just suspect. And I don't know if there's anything you've heard that you go, that's a concern for me, what they're trying to tell us about this. But it certainly looks, I don't know, and I'm smelling right now. It just doesn't smell right.
Well, and for anyone to say, "Well, that's absolutely wrong," and he absolutely was, and this happened absolutely, well, that you would have had to have been on that golf course and watched the whole thing yourself,
Sure.
and
Yes.
none of us did.
No.
None of us did.
No.
We're like I say, everybody believes somebody. We're getting our story from somebody else. Somebody reliable? Do we know who any of the newscasters are on the mainstream media or even a podcast like this or any other type of blog? We don't know who they are. We have no idea. So I'm not saying it's not,
Right. Right.
but I'm also not saying it is. I've got no way to know.
Right.
But so now any prudent American sitting and looking at this podcast would say, okay, let's look down the road here another 7 or 10 days and see what type of hysteria is developed, what types of politics are developed. Because you and I have talked at length on this. That's we don't want anybody to get this notion that we ought to have a president get unlimited power
Right.
based on something like this.
Yeah.
Or even say, well, God is back. God Himself is backing that. That's not at all what we want. We
No.
want the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. We want the law to go as it was originally designed, that Americans died for to provide. And so, if any of these news outlets and stories start to go in another direction,
Yeah.
or even encourage, well, we're going to do this for a period of time just for America's sake.
Right.
I got a big problem with that. And so, if this is another step towards that, I don't like it at all. If it isn't, time will tell.
No, that's exactly right. And time is telling in a lot of things. And I think it behooves anybody that if you think something's happening, or even if you think something's happening in your own life, I mean, this comes down to personal things going on in your lives too. We've become a culture that's very reactive, Glenn. Oh, this has happened, so I'm going to react. Or you could wait, right? Bible teaches that they that wait upon the Lord, their strength will be renewed.
Mm-hmm.
It's no wonder we are wiped out as people. It's because we're not waiting. Because there's something going on that's much bigger than this, and it is a sovereignty.
Mm-hmm.
It's an intentionality that God has produced. He already has a plan in place, and my job is to not only trust that, but then be the character that Christ died for me, in the midst of that. And I know that's a focus for us, with the men and talking with men and encouraging men and that
Mhm.
say, here's where we are. And I'm not trying to tell you, what I don't say is panic.
Right,
Everybody
right,
panic because
right.
this is what's
No,
happening.
right.
That's problem number one. We at the ministry where I'm at, we call that squirrel moments. And we all know what happens to squirrels when they panic on the road. 100% of the time they get hit.
Mhm.
So there's no point in doing that. That's important not to do that. But the other thing in regards to that is in maintaining that character in the midst of that, you have to trust in the sovereignty. And Glenn, when we were off air, we were talking about this, and I appreciate this conversation very much because there's two types of intentionalities that we as a culture and Christians have come to believe. It's like, well, God is this, but that's not him. But then we also refuse to believe that there's an intentionality against us.
Right, right, right.
And that's not doom and gloom.
No.
But that is a truth that must be embraced, I believe.
Some of the books that I've read in the past, it was a fascinating book about a pilot that flew the P-47 in the very early days of America being in World War II. He was based in Great Britain, and he flew his first mission. And he'll never forget in the book when he writes that, the first time he got jumped by the Luftwaffe and they were shooting at him, he went, "Holy moly, these guys are trying to kill me." And his whole worldview changed in an instant. There was no question in his mind anymore about what was going on. And unfortunately, in America, that seems to be lacking.
Right.
I don't know. We've had many podcasts here explaining some of the details about that, but I don't know why anybody would come into a news story, something else. Oh yeah, these guys have our best intention in mind, but they would never lie. They'll always tell us the truth for our best interest, and we're knowledgeable about all this stuff. But then the things that are really happening, we
Yeah.
don't know anything about. The podcast we did on the economy and the Federal Reserve and the debt and all that stuff. No one seems to have an interest in that, and that's as real as a heart attack.
Right.
And no one seems to care at all. And so if this is happening regularly and the government's behind it,
Right.
then what perspective can we have other than to say for some reason they're doing this on purpose?
Right. Right. And where's that purpose come from? Why is that going on? I mean, we will be one of the problems with the Christian culture. I'm gonna come against it for just a second. I got to speak out on that. One of the problems with the Christian culture is that we've adopted this. Everything's positive. We have to be positive about
Mhm.
this. We have to be positive about that. And what we've done as a result of that is we put blinders on our own eyes, and we're actually lying to ourselves by being, well, I'm just, the cup's always half full. I believe in having that hope and
Absolutely.
taking that posture. What I'm not about is denying the truth of what's going on. You know, you know what? We're going down the road and we're doing 130 miles an hour in the car, and there's a cliff. Well, if we drive off of that, we're going to die. Hey, don't be such a naysayer, right? That's
Doom and gloomer.
you doom and gloomer. You know what? You're not like God because you're not having hope in all this. You know what? God can do all things. Yeah, he could probably lift the car right off of there
Yep.
and save you. That could be true. But what I'm saying is you could slow down and you could turn. And they're like, oh my gosh, now you're just taking away all the joy and faith out of this because that's what we're run after. And Glenn, our culture has collided in such a way where we have misplaced faith.
Hmm.
We have misplaced our faith and we're putting it on a wrong hope.
That's the truth.
And that hope has become situations, scenarios, outcomes we're hoping for, and we're hoping for that in people instead of actually hoping in God.
No question.
And we're starting to get into this dangerous tie that say, hey, if we vote this way, then we show that our hope is in God. That is not the case. That's not ever been the case.
Mm.
God's people turn to God. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And the outcome of that is us finding ourselves back in what God has already sovereignly placed is his will. It's like, somebody believes in Jesus Christ for the first time and then they go, all right, now God, let's make a plan. And God's like, no, welcome to the plan.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we're at too.
Yeah.
We have to be careful as Christians not to misplace where our faith is going.
And there's a very distinct principle that comes from the Bible, comes from the Christian faith, which is you don't believe everything you hear.
Yep.
And one of those big things is gossip. And that's not preached on very much. Nobody talks about it too much. And I'm as guilty as the next guy. Every vocation, any situation you're in, somebody's going to say something about somebody else that's not true. And they're going to pass that word on to the next person. And if it's juicy enough,
Right.
and bad enough, we're going to spread it to everybody we can think of. And then we're going to think about that person in that light and even make policy or plans based on that. And so here we are in a whole culture where we look at stuff coming from the media that's gossip.
Yes.
Can't be validated. There's things that just aren't true completely. And for the very few percent, the small percent of things that are true, isn't enough to validate any knowledge or trust in the system. So when you see something on the news, you got to take a step back and say, okay, I don't know that for sure. So
Right.
I'm not spreading it. And I don't
Yes.
know how many conversations you've had with another person. Well, don't you believe this or that or this? I don't know anything about this, that, or other. I've seen it on a news story, but I certainly haven't seen it myself. I don't know if it's true or not. And I'm certainly not going to make any policy about it.
No, that's exactly right. That's a position I think we'd have to be in as real believers. When somebody goes, "Oh my gosh, did you hear what happened?"
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, did you hear what happened? It needs to be the first place of us as Christians to say, maybe I did and maybe I didn't,
Right.
but maybe that's not what we're supposed to talk about.
Right.
Did you hear what happened? Was I supposed to? Did I need to? Because it's pulled away from where we are. Our lives are supposed to be actually be accountable as
Right.
believers. And, so I go back and obviously we posted we set up this program saying, hey, we're going to talk about Trump or the second assassination. Well, this is what we're talking about is there's a
Right.
second assassination. And why are you still talking about it? Okay, so, all right, this guy was found. So what conversations,
Right.
wow, did you hear about this? Well, this could really be this, it all could be, but what are you supposed to be talking about? What are you supposed to be talking about with your wife? What are you supposed to be talking about with your kids?
Mm-hmm.
I think you're supposed to train up your children in the way they should go, that even when they are old, they will not depart from it. I think you're supposed to, as a man, start to live with understanding with your wife. Why? Because that's happening every 5 minutes of your life.
Mm-hmm. That's the real stuff.
That's the real stuff right there. And for the ladies listening to this, if you're married, I think what you need to be doing is learn about what does that mean to respect my husband? How has God put me faithfully in his life
Mm-hmm.
to help him? That's the stuff of today.
Mm-hmm.
And I know my wife and I are enjoying more times of sitting down and going, hey, this is us.
Mm-hmm.
And who us is very important to the heart of God. Very important to the heart of God. Now, we'll be the first two to really chat about some things that are going on,
Mm-hmm.
but also go, but you know what? That doesn't mean anything, and we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the biggest thing. We don't know. But we're listening, and it's like a giant gossip thread, and look at the way we run around.
Oh, boy.
As a result, I think it's dangerous.
One of the fascinating things about reading about history, particularly recent history, by recent, let's call it 100 years, is you look back at government agencies in particular and how in the technical age, where you can get a lot amount of information out digitally over the airways, some government institution, particularly at the federal level, always had some standing with the media that was close by, either a journalist or an editor or somebody at a mainstream newspaper that you could manipulate to get a story out that you needed done. And this is ad nauseum, the number of times this has happened. And some of them were like legit because there was secret things that really just didn't need to be out militarily. There might be things going on. And some of them weren't so legit. But the fact that it's been going on for a long, long time should make every American take pause and go, well, it still could be going on.
Yes.
And probably is.
Yeah.
But we don't want to believe it because our guy this has happened to him. If you're a Trump guy, our guy has happened to him. Okay, well, great. Well, what about your family? What about your kids? What about your community? What about, I guarantee this weekend there's going to be 10 zillion people going to football games, and probably not 10 zillion. That could be fact checked. And they'll completely forget about all of this and not frankly care.
Right. Right.
And so then these people come out of the big auditoriums watching their game. Okay, what do they know about the real politics? How many dollars are they paying in taxes from income and local stuff this week or this month or this year? They have no idea, nor do they care.
Yeah.
But give me an exciting story about an assassination attempt or something else, and man, everybody's a chatterbox.
Right.
This is great, but the stuff that really matters, what's going on in the legislature at the state level or even in your local level, no one has a clue.
Right.
And no one talks about it.
No.
So what are we doing?
We're missing the important keys that make a country, or at least this country. We're missing the points that have mattered for a long time. And I'm not saying we're going to have this podcast, we're going to recover all that and land back at ground zero. I don't know. No. But I know this, if you don't go back to a foundation, you never know how the building was supposed to be in the first place. And that's important. And so right now we should be, I don't know, Glenn, if we're going to have I don't know if there's going to be an election or not.
Right.
And I've talked to other
It's
people who
not a
thought that too.
guarantee.
It's not a guarantee.
Nope.
And when you see the fruit of communistic socialistic idealism, which is basing what is right or wrong based on some sort of social status that's going on, and then looking at just how much control is going on in the government over people and the information you're talking about. I mean, we have just been schooled over the last 4
Oh
years
boy.
about how people respond to information. And I know this nation has not learned its lesson, but I do believe it has divided us in a way that is it was unavoidable. I think it made a
Hmm.
greater chasm division between us as people. And I don't think that's a bad thing,
No.
Glenn. I
No.
don't.
No.
I think it has revealed what has been necessary.
Yep.
And so now I start to see, I saw a post come through and say, man, you know, a true leader brings people together. And I thought, you don't read the scriptures because Jesus said, I came to divide.
Hmm.
Jesus said, I came, and in the case of truth, he said, family members would be against family members.
Right.
Now, I'm not advocating. This is not a podcast about advocating. Hey,
No.
you need to go come against your family.
Right.
But what Jesus said was, I have come, I'm bringing the truth, and this is going to divide.
Right.
And he's the greatest leader ever. He's the king of the universe. And that's what we need to come to. That's what we need to come to. I think the division, to be honest with you, is healthy at this point. It needs to be seen.
Very healthy. And some of my colleagues and people that I talk about when things are going on, had Germany been more divided in the 1930s,
Yeah.
things could have turned out altogether differently. But no, we're not. No, we're not. We just want to divide. We want to bring people together. And the term that they're using is a very socialistic term. We want to make people come to us and believe us without question and do what we say without question. And then we'll all be unified.
Right. Right.
And the whole idea of unification and the society that we're at is a disaster.
It is.
The whole Congress was set up to be not unified. It's like, all right, that's why all these people are represented from all these states in two, buildings of legislature, the House and the Senate, with a president and a Supreme Court, because they expect division. They want division.
Right.
It has to function in that way. And it's not that they're looking for fights. That's not the point at all.
No.
It's just we need to make sure the right thing happens. So we have to slow the process down, talk it out, think it through, go to the next direction. And the culture we see now, particularly with media, is throw all that under the bus.
Yes.
We're just going to we're going to utter a statement, and that's good enough for you. And if you don't like it, like TikTok will do and these other things, we're just going to cancel you.
Right. Right.
That's not at all a free society. And that smacks of an authoritarian state taking over.
It does. I never would have guessed that the phrase, the statement, the freedom of speech would have been so important in my life. And truly, I failed because I took it for granted.
I know.
And it is the evidence. Before I used to thought, well, yeah, this is America. You can say whatever you want. Okay. But now, what is interesting to me, Glenn, is that the demand for unity, as you talked about, which is not, we see that there's a healthy thing in being divided. Now there's a demand for unity, but
Right.
it needs to be understood. The only way for a godless culture to create unity externally, because Christianity, unity is found because people believe in their own need for the saving work.
Right.
So based on, hey, I need Jesus because I'm a sinner, then you can love one another and come into a unity as much as possible because you're on the same plane. But what we see going on in this country is like, we're going to unify you, which the only way to do that from where we stand is to control what you're saying.
Yep.
Because what you're saying is divisive. And so they are forcibly attempting a unity based on a social righteousness that is unholy, it's unrighteous, it's ungodly, it doesn't fear God at all. And they want people to argue about who should be the president. They want people to argue about blacks, whites, Latinos, Asians, you name it.
Right.
They're bringing up so much junk because its intention is to say, no, we want to create the speech that you need to have so that we can, let's come together. I'm going to say, let's not.
I agree.
Let's not come together. I would rather listen to anybody of any culture tell me exactly what they think and have them hear me as a white, blue-eyed, although I just got told they were more green.
Yeah,
really.
it's
So that's what
important.
it was
It's
said
important.
to any. It's important. False information. I don't want to propagate that. Right.
I'll fact check you,
Somebody
man.
fact check my eyes.
Oh boy.
And I was told it depends on what shirt I'm wearing. So anyway,
Okay. Your wife then? Yes, got it. Got it.
yeah, that's right. That's right. I'm also healthy or overweight based on what color of shirt I wear. So it doesn't matter.
Critical.
And it is. And so that's where we're at in this. I'd rather they would listen to me and go, okay, I'm listening to you. I'm listening to you. White,
Mhm,
green-eyed, blue-eyed,
Mhm.
in shape, out of shape. I'm listening to you because that's healthy.
Right.
But when we start looking at the culture and say what you're thinking on the inside, what you're saying, I'm not listening. You need to say what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And anybody throws that on
That's a
me,
problem.
that's where we're at. And that is a problem.
I agree completely, and that should bother everybody.
It should.
We don't have to agree. Nobody's going to completely agree,
Right.
and there's nothing wrong with that. But
Right.
to force you to agree
Yep.
and to tell you, we'll give you a worldview and we'll tell you what to say and what to do, and then we'll all be united, and then things will be fine.
Yeah.
It's just not a fact. That will never be the case. And way, way, way too many people believe it. I mean, even in the political realm, well, who's your guy? Well, it's this guy. Okay, great. So why? I like the way he looks, or I like the way she talks, or okay, well, what's the job description?
I like the way she laughs uncontrollably in the middle of questions that are hard.
Exactly. And that is comical, by the way. I do appreciate that. But
Sorry.
The thing, that's funny. The thing is, nobody, I mean, nobody, not the president, not the vice president, not the Donald Trump running for president. Nobody is talking about the constant assailing of the Constitution that we're getting right now.
That's right.
There should be no candidate standing up there saying, I'm going to cut your taxes. No, you're not.
That's right.
You're going to go through the Congress. You're going to procure a budget of some kind, hopefully, or even pass a law.
Yeah.
And then maybe you can sign that. But you're not doing anything. And so what are you going to do, Donald Trump, to protect our free speech? Why are we always going to court right now to be able to speak our mind?
Right.
Why?
Yep.
That's the firewall that keeps a tyrannical government away from a free people.
Yes.
Is always the Constitution. Who is talking about why are your Second Amendment rights under constant assault? Why are your Fourth Amendment rights under constant assault? Mr. President, Mr. Ex-Vice President, Mr. Ex-President, who is saying, you know what, here's how I'm running. I'm running on the platform of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And I will do everything in my power to make sure that is followed by the Congress and me personally for the term that I've got in place.
Yes.
Because that is in crisis right now.
It is.
It's in crisis, and not a person is talking about it. Rather, we're talking about Ukraine, or we're talking about an assassination attempt, or we're talking about this, that, or the other. And it is divisive, and it steers us away from what actually matters.
It does.
Let's step off the deck of the Titanic for a minute, ladies and gentlemen, go into the dining room, and we'll have a cup of coffee and talk politics.
Right.
Well, what's the problem? The dang ship is sinking.
Right.
And instead of telling us maybe we should get on a lifeboat and completely alter the way we're doing things here, completely ignored.
Yeah,
just ignored.
It is. And I want to, because I when you we talk about Donald Trump, sometimes we want to balance things out by talking about the things that seem a little scary with Donald Trump. But I don't want to disregard here that the Liberal Democratic Party is I got to say, the full on force.
Agreed.
They are shameless. The difference is they are shameless about it. And I'm watching liberal idealism and reactionaryism coming through social media where people are freaking out. And the thing that's interesting about them is they don't want in any way me to talk.
No,
there's nothing they want me to say.
No. Ask RFK Jr.
Absolutely. He is. I'll tell you what, that guy, if there's a guy I want to pray for in leadership, it's RFK.
Yep.
Who would have ever guessed that? But I'm telling you, he is strong. This guy,
he's taking a lot of assault.
He is taking a huge assault. And when I see people, I see some of the craziest media stuff coming, and they're all attacking Christians, and they're saying, well, you don't want freedom. And I'm just like, well, let me think what I want. Well, the problem with you is well, how about you let me think what I'm going to think and say what I'm going to say? Yeah. They don't want it. It's intolerable. Right. People are screaming and yelling. Literally, people are like, and they're going all crazy. It's like, see, this is where we're at. So the thing that I think is interesting about and kind of sad for Donald Trump is that, I'm not going to lie, I'm a Christian guy. And even though vengeance is the Lord's, my favorite movies are the ones with great vengeance. right? And that's probably why, right? You see, you sit back and you go, well, I'm a Christian. I'm supposed to love everybody. I'm not supposed to exercise vengeance. You aren't supposed to exercise
Right.
vengeance. I
No.
get it. So the first time Donald Trump was running for office, you know, as a Christian man, I'm like, you know what? At least somebody's throwing a right hook and knocking the teeth out of
Yep,
somebody.
exactly.
Isn't that terrible? I
We've
mean,
not
that's
been completely rejected.
absolutely. And it's like watching the Rocky movies, like, yeah, finally somebody's swinging and hitting. And unfortunately, it's also telling of where we were as a country at
Oh,
that
man.
point. And I have to say, I believe our country needed that. It needed something to kind of
Agreed.
rock our world,
Agreed.
especially the Christian world, who's been passive for so
I
long.
know.
Oh, well, Donald Trump, this, you know, I could never vote for him. And, you know, he this. I get it. Okay, so don't fight. Does anybody else see where we're at right now?
I know.
And so it started with me that way. And the reason I was so on board with, like, finally somebody who's swinging and hitting. And I'm not going to
Yep.
lie, the Republican Party in the whole, they weren't even swinging, let
Nope.
alone not landing something.
And most of them still aren't.
That pause for effect.
Pause for effect.
Pause for effect. That's the truth.
Yep.
And because the only thing that I see now as this is going down the pike like this is it suckered every single one of us into going, if we get the right guy in, we have the right
I
power.
know.
But we don't understand that there are things that I'm not against Trump. I'm not against some of these things, but they're also already using the same rhetorical foolishness to stand their ground. And I wish they wouldn't.
I know.
Things like, well, why do you think that second attempt happened on your life? Well, you know, because of the rhetoric that the left is throwing at you.
I know.
Well, that's the same terminology that says we don't want you to talk because you're responsible for making somebody else attempt murder because you spoke. Glenn, that's the same thing that you and I got accused of in our last platform when we did the podcast
Right.
by the liberal, you know, composers of these medias saying you were a threat to somebody
Yes.
because of what you said. So you can't go, well, I'm on board with, no, I'm on board with conservatism and I'm on board with these things. But if your own party is using the same threat measure,
Right.
or here's one, it's the one that passed through my feed that says that former President Trump guarantees that he's going to prosecute to the maximum of the law these people who have done illegal things within the government system.
Right.
Well, initially I go, thank God, go get him, man.
Right.
Go get him. Like, let go of the leash, let the pit bull go handle it.
Right.
Right? What's the problem with that? That's what regimes do. They go in and they criminalize everybody who's in your government.
Right.
So
we're seeing that in Brazil right now.
Yes. So what's the only way they can make that right? I think if all of our government, all the parties, everybody sat down and said, we're going to shut up and let you people do something. Because that's what this government is built on. Turn it back over to the states and let the people of the states come together and say, you know what, Fed government, you're done. And if you've
had your chance,
if you really wanted to win my trust, you won't make me vote for you. You will sit down and say, we need to stop and let this be the people's again and not try to be that person.
Exactly. And man, wouldn't that be a pleasant surprise? You know, and I mean, hearing after hearing after hearing at the congressional level, you look at all these people up there, nothing's going to happen to them. No. They can ignore, these are unelected officials that just have done what they darn well please. They don't have to obey the law or anything else. And we all know that all these guys at the CIA, FBI, federal government level, they're not accountable. They don't answer to the same laws that you and I do.
No.
So wouldn't it be refreshing to see, and there's a very small handful of people in the Congress are saying, let's get these constitutional rights back. These people do not have the ability to just violate the law at will.
Right.
But they do. And they've been doing it for a long, long time because they know they'll never be challenged. They'll never be an account. And in the meantime, they assault Americans' freedom to talk, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion, freedom to bear arms, freedom, all these things that the Constitution writers died for.
That's right.
So that we could have, and then we ignore these things and think, okay, well, this time the government's actually on our side. This time they're not going to do anything bad to us. They certainly wouldn't take any money from our Social Security or Medicare accounts. They wouldn't do anything like that. They certainly wouldn't let known criminals go and terrorize our communities. They certainly wouldn't bring terrorists from former lands and airplanes and drop them off in big cities. That couldn't possibly happen, could it? No, not with our great government, all the people that are up there. Of course it is. And it's been happening in real time for generations. And now it's just clear as a bell.
Yes.
That this is happening. So how are we responding? By listening to newscasts and saying, well, hopefully our guy wins.
Right.
What?
Right.
And what will that do for you in your community? And the stuff you're supposed to be participating in seems to be non-existent.
We have been pulled. I never would have thought this. We have been pulled as a culture back into responsibility.
Yes, we have.
The condition of this country no longer actually lay on the ability of politicians.
Not at all.
This country's founding, we are back to a position where when be it economists, be it the Christopher Columbuses of the world discovering new lands, even if it was for business,
Yep.
bringing people over that said we must take a responsibility upon ourselves to create a place where people can live who are personally responsible.
Yep.
And the United States right now stands, hear me, condemned for the evils that it has done.
Oh, I know.
And the only people are going to do or fall into what I would call God's sovereign will is going to be those people that don't put their hope in the vote at all.
Yep.
I didn't say don't vote. I said don't put your hope in it.
Yep.
It's going to take citizens, the people.
Yep.
And we're having a hard time looking at that right now and saying, wait a minute, I have to do, that's right, something.
Yep.
Well, I need to do my part at the ballot box. That is absolutely not what I'm talking about.
Not at
That's
all.
not the something I'm talking about.
Yep.
We have to have the courage as people to go, wait a minute. Maybe my normal life needs to be a little less because it's time for me to gauge as a person and say, hey, guess what? We're kind of done
Yep.
with this. And you know why and I think there's people out there. I think we're seeing a group and a culture of people
No question.
that, and I'm excited to see that. And you can see that the social media is pushed down harder and harder and harder from
They
that.
see it too.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why Tucker Carlson, he's doing his national tour.
Yep. And I highly recommend that many people go as can.
Indeed. Because they're doing it, because we need to engage with people without being shut off.
Yep.
Think of the concept of that even being said in the United States, the great freedom of speech country. Well, we're fighting so we can have freedom of speech. No, it's gone. And you have to have the bravery to start stepping out. Well, Tucker Carlson, he's going to do it. We'll trust in him. He'll go coast to coast. He will. And we're thankful for that. But guess what? That means if Tucker can do it, you can go talk to your neighbor.
Yep.
If Tucker can do it, you can walk right into church Sunday school and say, you know what? By the way, why is our church voting immorality into the pulpit? What, are we expecting Tucker to walk in and be the prophet inside the church? He's not going to do it. It's going to take some men with some courage to stand up and say, the problem's right here, ladies and gentlemen. And this conversation needs to happen right here, right now.
And as often as possible. I just don't understand it. There's no way it's not a political solution in any broadest sense of the word. And it's not designed to be. And I think the reality of the people that see that, we're actually being kind of split apart from our foundation, from our traditions, from our religion, even from our communities, it would behoove the Americans to step up and say, no, I'm not having that. Right. I'm going to interact with my neighbors. I'm going to interact with the people around me. I'm going to interact in the government system that I'm obliged to participate in. Right. And when I have government institutions like the Department of Education just stepping up and saying, we're taking over, we're canceling any constitutional rights that you or your kids have, and we're going to do what we darn well please. Well, as any good American would, we keep sending them back to that communist boot camp.
Yes.
I don't understand it.
Right.
I don't understand it. It's as simple as saying, oh, heck no. Yep. We're not going to court. Our kids just aren't going there.
Right.
If you're going to stomp on them and tell them they can't say what they want, they can't practice a religion or even say a prayer or doing these other things in school, fine. We're not putting our kids there, but that is not what we do as a culture. Instead, we tolerate that. Yep. We don't want to cost anything. We don't have to maybe have a parent stay home and it might cost us some extra money to do that, or send them to a private school or something else. We don't want to do that. It'll cost us way too much, but we'll go to the poll and we'll vote for Donald Trump and hope that he solves all the problems that we're not willing to shoulder ourselves.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Glenn, and I see that run across the board. We're gonna take a little extra time because we had our technical difficulties. We're going to carry on the podcast because we need to continue to have the conversation. But I even saw you just mentioned something there that was. I listened to a conservative live conversation on radio yesterday, and a guy talked about this And we're going to delve into this here just a little bit too, because I think this new culture that we're in, there's a report, and if you want to check it out right there, right now on our live chat, those feeds have been put up. White Dove Ministries, DSM, whitedoveministries.net has put these up. You're going to want to check these feeds out, these articles, those links, because I find it very interesting. And we're going to segue into this because this is also where we're at in a culture. They're saying Gen Xers don't want to have children. And they're putting out all these reasons out there. And I'm saying bullhucky. Those aren't the reasons. And I'm going to talk about those a little bit. But the problem is this is not a new conversation. I kind of borrowed this from the show that I heard yesterday. The reason is this guy was ultra conservative. I liked where he was coming from, and I thought he was making a good point. Why are the Gen Xers not wanting to have kids, right? And then alongside with that, he was saying that the Surgeon General, and we have that up there, so I want you to check it out there at the live chat. We've put those links up there. The Surgeon General is saying that mental health for parents is going to be, it's the new warning. You need to be careful about stress and mental health. And of course, that, again, didn't pass my stink test.
No.
And this lady called in, and she and her husband farmed. And the guy was starting to get on board with her, saying that the number one reason that the Gen Xers aren't having children is because they can't afford it. And this is where I departed with that conservative talk show host. I just went, the button went off, and I said, I'm sorry, you're talking about the wrong thing, because that is untrue. That is not where we are at. Because this woman who called in, and I thought was very good, they'd raised their family, they'd all gone off to college, and this is what she said: you know what? It's tough in everybody's generation to figure out how to afford what to do.
Oh, absolutely.
And this is what she said that did not take in the show. She said, we learned to live with less. And this is what
how dare she?
How dare she, right? You mean humility and self-discipline and actually picking on that which matters?
And hard work?
Dude,
I can't imagine.
And that's where I parted ways with the conversation of the conservative host, because he said, well, yeah, but the costs really are up, because what's he wanting to do? Everything I want to do, I want to point at the Democrat Party and blame them for the last 4 years. That's a talking point I can get everybody on board with. But this woman had more understanding than he did at that point and said, we did what we did. So what she pointed out is Gen Xers are not prepared to live without.
No.
And this took a turn to the entire selfishness of this entire country right now. And so you can look at politics all you want, but if you got an entire generation of young couples that don't want to have children now, that's serious, folks. That is very, very serious.
Well, kind of the case in point, right along those lines, we're talking about, hey, we're not willing to sacrifice the necessary things to make this happen. And you even have another generation of kids that will be raised up, and they'll help pay Social Security and Medicare, and also take care of the elderly and that kind of thing. And we'll see it come up here in the fall. There's no question in my mind that the federal government will have a threat of a government shutdown. Again, it's that fiscal year end. And here we go again, threat of a government shutdown. Why would anyone want that to happen? Those great guys up there spending our money so well. So what will they do? Well, they'll dance around it for a while, and then they'll come to an agreement somewhere in October, November, after the military has had their pay cuts. And the air traffic controllers are losing money. They're going to step up and say, oh, we've solved it. We're going to move on. So why don't they just tell the people, we don't have any stinking money? We've spent it all. Well, because they know that this generation is not prepared to pay that bill.
That's right.
They are not. And so they're just going to keep digging a hole deeper until it's no longer possible to even have a discussion about how to dig out of this hole. And everybody in the government is on board with this. Everybody. And so here we are looking at this going, well, geez, yeah, I can't imagine that people don't when it comes, it's going to be a disaster on many fronts, because they know we're not ready for it.
Right. No, that's exactly right. And that's part of the problem, is that when people don't understand that everybody's going, my guy or gal who laughs at difficult questions uncontrollably.
A goat, you made note.
Like a goat. That was so funny. I don't know, put that meme together, but I would send him $20 right now to say thank you for that. It was so funny.
Just a little comic relief. That's all.
It was
nothing personal. Don't fact check us.
I'm not against the Vice President of the United States. I just, I'm just using my freedom of speech. That's all.
Exactly.
That's all there is to it. But we therefore don't have our eyes on the things that God actually would, if we read the Bible, we would find out, oh my gosh, just how far off we are.
Oh man, not even close.
And so we have to stop thinking our guy's going to go in and, every time the government comes up and says, you know what, if we don't increase the debt ceiling, this is what they say, we're going to have to shut the government down. Glenn, for the last 10 years, I've said this every time they report that. Thank God they're going to shut it down
I know.
because we're almost there.
If they
this
just
is
would.
this is what the country needs. They need to be shut down.
A little reality check for everybody.
That's exactly right. One of the listeners just wrote in here too, and I think this is real wisdom when I read this. This is a good statement because he says the actors, these deep state actors, have been on record committing treasonous crimes against the American people.
On record.
On record. This is a great statement, right? And what are we doing about that? Treasonous? Okay, so they've been doing on record treasonous acts. Treason has been happening in this country for a long time now.
A long time.
Yep. And it says these government officials have violated, here it is, here's the emphasis, constitutional rights of Americans for years now. And he goes on to say that there needs to be some accountability.
Agreed.
So how do we do that? Well, we're talking about this. See, the government can't keep itself accountable anymore.
And nor will it.
No, it will not. No, it absolutely will not.
No.
And so how does that need to happen? The government needs to resign and stop.
Yep.
And then the people need to restart with the Constitution again. Need to take the Constitution and say, hey, this is where we're at. And we're missing the point of that. So look at the state of the country that we're in right now. Look at what we've been peddling since the 80s in the psychological world. And I dabble in this because if Gen Xers don't want to have children right now, I have to say the psychological world and the government officials have all had their opinion about how to raise children. Guess what? You are wrong 100% of the time. You are wrong. Well, don't do this with children. Well, that's stupid. So I'm going to do that with kids because I'm reading my Bible and this is what it says to do. And you know what, Glenn? Christians have been on board for the last 40 years going, you know what? This governmental community that has our best interest, that we're going to start following that. Well, guess what? If you don't want to be accountable to God after he has saved your soul from eternal damnation by the way you raise your kids, then you're going to get Gen Xers not wanting to have children.
Right.
Now, I'm just going to say it point blank. God wants people to live and be saved. Satan, whether you believe in him or not, because he's as real as the day is long,
He is.
wants people to not make people.
Yep.
So if you're on board with that, because you decided, the psychological community said, well, don't put a heavy hand on your kid's butt. If you're on the psychological community that says, you know, when that child is born, you just need to let them find their way. There's not a more anti-biblical discussion that's being had at that point.
And we're seeing that real time right now.
Absolutely.
Across the country. We're watching it happen real time.
Yes.
Through all industries, through everything that we're seeing. The whole fiber of the nation is unaccountable people that can do what they want, when they want, with nothing ever happening to them when things go bad.
Yeah.
And when they make bad decisions and choices. So here we are. So if the next generation probably, you know, and I don't know, it's a story real where they getting their data for next gens. I don't know. Gen Xers, they may or may not. I don't know. But let's just assume.
I'm sure it's an accurate poll.
Right. Let's assume the story's close to being accurate, which that's as much as I'll give it. I can see where they would look at that and say, this could be a tough spot. This would be a tough place to raise kids. And for me, if I was in that generation, my biggest concern would be watching what the government's doing.
Right.
And I don't want my kids to be subjected to it.
That's right.
And there's a lot of people that are not having kids. I've talked to them for that very reason. And some of the people that I know that do have young kids are very afraid of what that future will look like.
Yep.
And it's not because of the communists in China or Russia or Cuba. It's our own country. And what they're doing to the Constitution and freedoms. We don't want our kids and grandkids to have to deal with that. And that will be a reality for them.
Yes. Reading this article from New University, and this is what we pulled up online here that people can check out while they're joining us in the conversation here. University of California, Irvine, New University Official Campus Newsletter. This is what they write. The Gen Xers are saying, here's their reasons behind this. Now, personally, I don't think that's a reason at all. They are not prepared to carry this burden because they've not been trained in the burden of parenting. And as a result of that, anyway. So additionally, it says costs have become a significant contributor to them that is not having children. Costs. So they're saying, okay, costs.
It's not completely false, but no.
It's not completely false because the costs are absolutely, and there's a lot of costs. Right. But guess what? There's a lot of cost to everything. Mm-hmm. So we don't have a priority anyway. So they're saying, well, okay, so cost is done by this. And this survey was done in regards to the expenses by a morning consult was the survey that did this, that's saying, one of our number one reasons is it's just too expensive. Okay. Here's another reason that this generation wants to go childless. Are you ready for this? This is the next one they list in priority: climate change.
Of course. Yeah.
Climate change.
That's intuitive, isn't it?
Probably one of the largest falsehoods that's ever been propagated in the history of mankind ever. I've lived long enough now to remember when they taught climate change. And now I'm old enough to look at what they taught and said, wow, you lied. And here you are, and you're not saying nothing about it.
Prediction after
A prediction.
prediction was false, and you'll never see it in the news or anywhere else.
You won't. Why? Because we're going to talk about a second assassination. We're going to talk about illegals coming over the border. And guess what? That is a problem.
Yep.
That you need to brace yourself for that. That's no joke. But, that's why they're not having kids.
Climate change.
Climate change. So climate change is one of those, or they're just not strong enough to be parents or self-sacrificing. I'm just saying. Climate change, a lacking in interest in having kids is also prioritizing other matters like their career. When did that go on the high point of moral? What?
I know.
So now you're talking about people's purpose in life comes from their career instead of who? Well, the God that they've been saying shouldn't be spoken of in the public school systems for the last 40 years. Oh, so careers are so important. We just shouldn't have children. That's more important. How can your career be important so you don't have children and yet complain about the cost of having a child? That doesn't reconcile.
Well, you replace God with materialism, which is what we have done across the board in this country. Then to buy stuff, you need a career.
Yes.
To have stuff is your God, and to have lots of stuff is your God. And so therefore we will sacrifice anything and everything to have stuff because that is our God.
Yep.
And so, yeah, of course, career. I mean, now I'm not saying don't have a successful career, even shoot for it, of course. And if you believe in Jesus at all, he says you must work in that career like he's the boss.
Right.
And you're answering to him. You're doing everything like you're working for him, which means you show up to work on time. You do the best work you can. You don't lie, cheat, or steal that company out of anything like that. So he's not anti-career or even anti-work. It's just when it's supplanted, what they're saying is, okay, I'm going to have this career and listen from my heart. God bless those couples that say, okay, if that's the way we're going, we're not going to have kids and just toss them to the dogs.
Right.
I have no objection with that at all. But when that becomes more important than anything else, then we have a problem, because if all young people feel that way, there's not another generation coming up. Yeah, they can kiss all their materialism goodbye, because that'll come down with a big crash when there's no generation to pay the bills or to take care of them.
Yes. With that being said, let me read this next part of the article because it proves its point here very well. This is another interesting thing, and it's sad because the Communist Manifesto speaks to all these ideas. Communism is proven to be put in place when society says family is no longer the issue.
Yep.
And that is what I'm reading about right here in the New University of California article right here. This is the evidence that we cannot ignore that's actually saying this is what communism is about. It goes on to say, for other reasons for these generations to be childless. Check this out, Glenn. This is actually a little bone chilling. The hair's crawling up on the back of my neck when I read this. An increase in women, this is a reason they want to be childless, an increase in women in joining the workforce and remember demonizing men being providers.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so we need to increase what? Women in the workforce. An increase in women joining the workforce and prioritizing their careers differs greatly from the past generations.
All those idiots of the past,
All
right?
the idiots of the past,
those
yes.
great women that raised us.
And they were. As Gen Z and millennials challenge the notion that women are anchored to childbirth and domesticity. Now, it goes on to say, while it's admirable that the newer generations are increasingly making choices that matter to them rather than following strict societal standards that have been followed for centuries, it's also necessary to acknowledge the effects a childless generation could entail. Let me interpret this for just a second.
Good luck. Gosh.
Yep. So while we're supposed to pat everybody on the back for not wanting children, here's the actual side effect for that. Society stops and ceases to exist. And you're okay that this cruel, strict societal standard that used to be, as if it was cruel towards women to do exactly what they were born to do, no less than it's cruel to do to men. We complain now about young men who are 30 years old that live in their mother's basements playing video games.
And there's plenty.
You shouldn't complain. You shouldn't complain. You should enjoy their freedom. You should enjoy their liberty. You should be happy that this continuous attack against men has been on the board for a long time. Well, men, you can do whatever you want. Men, you shouldn't bear any responsibility. Men, you shouldn't go to work. If you don't want to work, you shouldn't have to go to
I
work.
know.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is just where we're at as a result of that. And we have a lot of people who have just gone, oh, you're right. We don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. We want to do this. Well, I want to raise my kid, but I want them to have the freedom to do whatever they want. Strangely, that never lived in me. I wanted them to have the freedom to choose what is right and good so that they would be productive in society.
I know. It's like the movie The Untouchables when Sean Connery has that incident with that guy and says, "Do you think he's better or worse?" And here, that's a terrible example, by the way, but we are not better.
No.
But by any standard, we're just not better.
No.
By any standard. And I'll go all the way to Europe and look at that culture. I'll look at the American culture. We're not better by any standard. And it's not just that, but the women that do want to have kids and the women that do want to stay home with the kids are ostracized or treated poorly.
Yep.
Well, why can't they make their choice?
That's right.
Well, because that doesn't fit in with a globalist agenda of we'll raise your kids for you and turn this into a society that we want, not that you want.
That's right.
Because a normal woman wouldn't want that. She wouldn't want to be loving and caring like all the women that were in my life, my aunts, my own mother, my grandmothers. I couldn't have lived without them.
No.
Absolutely necessary. And they were wonderful people. And I learned a million things from them on how to live my life, how to treat other people, how to work hard, how to do all these things. And our society ostracizes them like they're not necessary. They're even fools for choosing that.
That's right. That's right. And so instead of letting women do that, instead of the importance of that they really are, and we see the society crumble, then the U.S. Surgeon releases the general issues and advisory of mental health and well-being for parents. And the red flag that goes off here is that, well, the Surgeon General is saying, hey, look, we're going to take care of the parents. We're the ones who are going to issue what's good for parents. Well, that's also another sign that freedom has been removed from a society.
Right.
Because that's the purpose of family, not the Surgeon General. Surgeon General says, Glenn, I don't know if you knew this or not, that smoking is bad for your health.
No way.
You know who else told me for free? My dad. Isn't that amazing?
And just about every other human, right?
Unbelievable. Yeah, but John, the public school, heck with it. I learned for free in our own home, right? Well, the Surgeon General says that too much alcohol will destroy your liver. You could also ask your uncle who passed away from alcoholism. Right?
They'll tell you.
Come on. They'll tell you. Where's this to be learned in the family? They don't want the family.
No.
Glenn, they're tearing the family apart. The communist ideal is succeeding. So much so that Generation X is almost afraid because they don't know how to shoulder the responsibility to actually produce the next generation to do what is true and right. And God honoring.
I know. I don't know why people warm up to this. And luckily, there's at least a little bit of a trend where people are not. They tend to look at news stories like this and go, it's ridiculous, and move on to the next thing. Thank goodness this is happening to some degree because it is very direct. It's very agenda directed.
Yes.
For this kind of thing.
Yep.
Why do you listen to RFK Jr.'s speech when he announced that he was no longer going to run for president? I encourage anybody to watch that speech on whatever channel hasn't censored him already. Look at what he said about the health of Americans.
Yes.
And the way Americans are treated and what's going on. Just look at what he said.
That's right.
It's terrifying.
That's right.
The numbers are terrifying.
Yes.
And we're not having the discussion at all. Instead, we have the U.S. Surgeon General telling us, oh, yeah, you might lose your mind after a while, which shouldn't happen because society's so awesome.
Right.
With the Christians not talking anymore.
Right.
It's so awesome. Everything's comfortable. Nobody's depressed.
Right.
So, and eventually, and we talked about this earlier, the pendulum will swing where it goes, okay, we'll take it from here, big fella.
Yeah.
Says the federal government. And that is a very authoritarian, totalitarian, communistic agenda.
Yes.
We'll take it from here. When you have the babies, we'll raise them, we'll train them, we'll tell them to do what they need to do. You will not have a say. And people laugh like that's not going to happen. It's happening now.
Right now. And has
right
been.
now. And has been for generations.
Yes. Yes. And that's why we're in the position that we're at now. And I got to tell you, if life is too good for you, you're not willing to have the courage to do what is necessary because you're not concerned about the foundation of this country.
Not at all.
You're not concerned perhaps about the foundation of your own family. No. And to be honest with you, that hasn't been a level of accountability the church should have been responsible for in a long time.
Right.
Well, I'm sorry you got divorced. Well, maybe all 8 of the elders of the church should have gone to the man and said, guess what's not going to happen today? Well, we've just gone. No, guess what's not going to happen today,
Yeah, good luck, right? I
right?
know.
Well, if you make divorce easy, right? Uh huh. If you
That's
make
also a described objective of the Communist Party.
Yes, right. If you make these things easy, if you get everybody educated in a public system around one ideal, and then you shut people like RFK down. I mean, our own show was censored by two of the media groups just because we played his own interview of his own speech. They
Joe
don't
Biden, yeah.
they don't want it heard.
No.
RFK or Joe Biden.
Nope.
That president really said that stuff.
He did.
Well, why would somebody not want us to remember what he said?
No, alarming.
That's right. And I don't know if we could put the challenge for us, everybody, especially, our listenership and other people, as you forward this along and say, you know what, here's the deal. We become lazy as people across the board. We become lazy as people as far as the responsibility that we need to pick up from here. And we're living in a country that's proven that for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to do things now to come to one another and say, you know what, it starts with us, right? So I need to look in the mirror. And I've done this more and more over the last 10 years than I ever would have thought I would. Because I thought I was going to have an easy life, Glenn. I think it was called the American Dream.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I was going to have the American Dream and sit back and sip Mai Tais. I don't know if I can say that as a Christian or not. Sip Mai Tais or some other strong drink just to help me loosen up. I don't know. And I was going to go into the Everglades of retirement and breathe easy. And this was going to be until I woke up and went, look at the state that we're in.
Oh my God.
And I looked in the mirror and I said, am I a Christian or am I not?
What am I doing?
What am I doing? And what is it time for me to do? We do not have time to continue to ignore and do nothing or get involved in the gossip conversations that are going around. If you want to talk about it, put a time limit. We're going to talk about that for 10 minutes. The next thing we're going to talk about is who are you as a man? Who are you as a woman? What are you doing to teach your kids? And are you pointing to God? And by the grace of God, are you showing him that he saved you? And this is the next step. And as a result of that, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be responsibility. And that's what's got to come from that.
It's no longer time for going to church on an Easter or on a Sunday or even on a Sunday. It's responsibility for getting together, and we've talked about that here. It's very real. You don't feel like going. I got other things going on. I can't afford kids, but I've got them enrolled in 50 different athletic situations and club all over the country, and I've got them enrolled in this, that, and the other. It's cost me tens of thousands of dollars. I really don't have time for that. Follow God or take care of the country stuff. Gosh, unfortunately, it's just the state of life that I'm in. Time is checkmate. There's no other place to go. There's no other thing to do. If you're not involved in something deeper than that, you're really going to be in for a shock when stuff comes unglued. Yeah. And I think there's a large number of people in this country that are going, oh my gosh, maybe we should reprioritize. Mm-hmm. And yeah, maybe we should have like 100 years ago, but I guess it's not too late. So let's reprioritize and say, I'm going to get together with some men on a Wednesday morning at a friend's house or a relative's house, and we're going to talk about life. We're going to encourage each other, challenge each other, help each other in some way, and then we're going to follow God in the way he wants us to go.
Yes.
And do what he's asked us to do. You don't have time for that? Well, then please don't complain about the situation.
You're right. Nope.
I'm so sick of people coming and saying, well, if as long as we do this and that, what are you doing, man?
Yep.
I haven't seen you do anything.
Yeah.
Anything at all. So who's picking up the load for you? We're just past that. We got to pick up the load that God's given to us to pick up with his help.
Yep.
And then follow him.
Yep. Are we advocating you don't vote? No. But I'm going to say this, your vote is nothing but a feather of the responsibility that actually has to happen.
And it might not even be legitimate this time around.
That's exactly right. It might not even happen. And what would you do? And people are like, well, this and this and this. You know what? When you visited countries when that's abject failure, when voting didn't happen because somebody did get shot in the head, when somebody's not allowed, or your number one in Russia, if anybody was paying attention last year, your number one competitor is imprisoned by Vladimir and then killed.
Yep.
What I'm saying is this.
Other than that, he's a pretty good guy.
Other than that, he's a pretty good guy. It's amazing. Nobody's ever seen such a man win with an 86% landslide in that.
He's just that good, brother. He's just that good.
He's so good. It's amazing what you do when you eliminate the competition. And this is burdensome thinking. Right now, I want to encourage people. If you go vote, that's fine. But if you think that's even 1% of what you need to do next to see happen, go vote for your person, win, lose, or draw. But if you don't start picking up 99% of what the Word of God asks you to do, what the Constitution asks you to do, You have taken even if it's a winning vote, you have taken it and thrown it in the toilet.
Yep.
Because if you're an American citizen, you're going to do what the Constitution says you can and should.
Yes.
And if you're a believing citizen, you're going to open up your Bible and say, it's time for me to stop falling short with what I am supposed to do. Your vote is actually like, oh, this is it. This is what I'll do.
That's my pass for being delinquent on what I should do.
Oh,
it just is. That's how we play it.
Just a second. I hear crickets. They're chirping even as we sit here. Well, I did my duty. No, the nation is in the condition it is because we have not done our duty
at all.
One of the greatest men's group outreaches I've ever been to before, a conference. An elder in the Lord stood up and he used the word that I've never heard in Christianity at all. And he said, we have a duty. And we as Christians go, well, I have a freedom. No, we as men have a duty to walk in that. And we have that duty today.
We do.
There's absolutely no question about it. Well, anything else we want to throw at the people?
Oh, man. I'm sure they've had quite enough.
Maybe. You're going to you got a good meal here, and you can sit on that meal, and you can chew on that meal, and you can enjoy that meal. This is food for thought. And I want to tell everybody, I want to thank everybody for joining us, but I want to say, when you go away from hearing what you've heard today, I want you to consider where you're at. We are not here to condemn. These are strong words, but what I do want to say to you is, look, find the strength inside of you to say, you know what? It's time for me to roll up my sleeves and take care of the way my life has not been lived, and it's time to begin to live that way. I play a role in this. Do not pretend for one moment the vote is going to get this done. It's going to take people, citizens of the kingdom of God, and turning to God to get this done in the labor of what they are responsible to do. There's absolutely no question. I want to thank White Dove Ministries at whitedoveministries.net for supporting this. Pray for us. We are praying for a nation. I don't know if the vote's going to get to happen, but if it does, be more than that and hold yourself to the accountability of living a life that you have said to everybody you live. God bless, and do not forget. Therefore, fear the Lord, serve him in sincerity and truth, put away gods which your fathers have served beyond the river. And choose this day whom you will serve. As for me and my house, Glenn, we will serve the Lord.